That's the end of the presentation portion. That's the end of the presentation portion. The web pages, and I will flash them on the screen again real quick, but this here that you're looking at is the page I put up for the club tonight. It's got some links from tonight's presentation, including a link to the presentation itself and my YouTube channel. There's a few presentations on there. My two Ham Radio University presentations, one on FT8 and one on Raspberry Pi for ham radio. There's also a whole bunch of Sunday Night Science Net, which are not as interesting as my presentations. It's me sitting here holding a microphone and talking. Our little club up here, every Sunday night at 8 p.m., I do a little thing called the Science and Technology Net. We're not always talking about radio. Sometimes we're not even talking about electronics. Sometimes we're talking about some pretty wacky things. It depends on what the people who sign in want to hear sometimes. But I've been doing some things that are relevant. We have two recent ones where I'm starting to do a tour of the radio spectrum. I started down at the bottom of VLF, and I've done two of them so far. I did VLF through about 4 megahertz, and then we did 4 megahertz through 7 megahertz in the last one. And I'm just going through and telling you what's there, what's going on, what used to be there. So, but there's a lot there, and you can watch some of those on that as well, including some weird little quirky things that I post here and there. The kit guide, which is here, is simply a post on that same blog. And you can see there's a picture of the digital radio. And as you scroll through here, you'll see each company has an entry and a link. And there's plenty of them that I didn't talk about tonight. But there's plenty of them that I did. And when sometimes one of these companies will disappear, I'll leave them up here for an update or two just in case they come back. But sometimes it's sad and they go away. Sometimes I'll try to track down the owner and see what happened, but that doesn't always work. So we've lost a few. We lost a couple this year. So but there's definitely a lot more in here. And I try to keep it current. For the ones that are actually making radios, it'll list the radios that they make and some of the information, but I recommend tracking down whatever you can from the links. Also, you can email me. Once again, I'll put those links back up here. If you know of something that's not on the list and you want to see, you can always pop me an email for that. So, all right, hopefully that's still up there, but there's my email address, neil@neilgoldstein.com, the address of the blog, and radiokitguide.com. Also, if you just go to neilgoldstein.com, you'll get links to pages I maintain or used to maintain. Not everything on there is active, but the Fofio site is there. A couple sites I don't maintain much anymore, and a memorial site to my late brother is there. So, all right, I can reshare the screen if someone asks a question that requires it, but I think I will turn off the screen sharing for now.
Neil, thank you very, very much. Boy, I tell you, I learned more tonight. Who knew, I guess, in terms of just how much was out there. So let me just, in terms of time, let me turn it over to our attendees tonight. What questions do you have for Neil?
This is Charlie Cibula, AC2ZU. I have a point of reference for you, Neil. We did have a great presentation from Dave Martinhouse on the spectrum. You talked about studying the spectrum. It's on our YouTube, FairlawnARC YouTube. You may look into that. I think everybody would agree it was a very good presentation.
Excellent. I would definitely be curious about that because
Dave is on the presentation tonight. So other questions?
Excellent. I still fascinated to this day by the things that I used to hear when I was a kid, and there's still, you know, the things that are in between the broadcast bands and the ham bands, utilities, are some of the most fascinating things on shortwave, but not as much as there used to be, obviously. All right.
Great. Other questions?
Just had a question on the small, simple transceivers. You say QRP, are they basically 10 watts and they're basically crystal controlled, so they're not, you can't really change frequency. You have to put a crystal in for every frequency?
Well, they're all over the place. The Pixies, for example, are probably 300 to 500 milliwatts, depending on the quality of the transistors they threw in the package that day. Something like the Rock might put out as much as 3 to 5 watts, depending on the version. Kits like the old NS40 from NM0S, which you can still buy from him on eBay. It was just a straight, very simple transmitter project. That one, I think, puts out a full 5 watts, and it's a really simple build. So they are all over the place, but a lot of the really inexpensive, simple ones are really low power, from half a watt to a watt, down around there.
So they're crystal controlled. They're only one frequency. You got to buy a crystal for every frequency.
Most of them in the really simple end are crystal controlled, but some of them, like the breadboard, have a little VXO. So you're going to put a crystal in it, but you can pull that crystal, as they say, a kilohertz or two in one direction or the other. So, and there's little tricks if you read up.
Good job. Very good.
Other questions? Other questions?
And there's one in the chat here, and I don't know the answer. The rubber mat, if it was anti-static. I'd like to hope it is. What's funny is a lot of people ask me about what I do for anti-static. Up till now, I've really done nothing, but I may have to start thinking about it if I'm going to be handling some of these little surface mount PIC chips. Maybe I live dangerously, maybe I've had good luck, or maybe it's just not as big a deal as they make it out to be. I don't know which answer is correct, but I usually don't do a lot. But then again, I'm working on a concrete floor on a Formica countertop. There's not a lot of static generation, and it's not all that dry in the basement. So any other questions?
Other questions?
Comment.
Go ahead.
Good evening. This is Fred, W2AAB, just from a long-time builder. Built my first kit in 1957. 10 years old. 3-tube shortwave regenerative receiver from Heathkit. However, I've done a lot of building since then. Actually, most of my building has been not kits, but building from scratch. The most energetic project I undertook solid state was the HW8, and it was back in the 1980s. But since my eyesight has changed and my arm isn't as steady, I have to go back to the tube circuits again, and this is what I've been doing for quite a while. So just because of those two factors, I can't even use a magnifier on the small stuff. I tried, I just can't do it. But I enjoy, and there's nothing, by the way, this was an excellent presentation, Neil, congratulations on it, we appreciate it. There's nothing more satisfying than building a transmitter, receiver, or transceiver that you constructed yourself and then make contacts with it. This is a message I'm trying to communicate to people who are hesitant to do any building. You'll find few things in life as satisfying as knowing that you made this yourself and can successfully use it on the air. I just want to thank you again for the presentation. It was very good. And by the way, Diz that you referred to, that's W8DIZ. That's how he got his nickname.
I was wondering which came first, actually.
Thank you.
Fred will
Thank you
have the
very much.
answer
I
for
appreciate it.
Yeah, I've just got a quick question, I guess, and just in a comment that you made in passing about, someone who offered sort of a bag of parts and a schematic. Okay. If someone were looking to get started and build their first kit, and obviously I go back to Heath and stuff like that, but what would you recommend? Okay. Not only in terms of the skill and the time required, but also the ability to sort of follow the directions, if you follow me on that. So what would you recommend?
That's one of the things, that directions are key. The QRP guys stuff is pretty good, one of their simpler kits, but probably the breadboard, the sawdust, 2 from the Splinter 2 from Breadboard Radio is not too hard to build. It is quite a few components, but what I'm going to recommend for somebody who's never built anything and maybe wants to actually learn a little radio theory in the process, there's a company called Elenco, ELENCO. They make kits, they have for years, and they have an AM/FM radio kit that you can buy as part of a maker's package, I think from Barnes & Noble. I've also seen it on Amazon. Elenco, ELENCO. I'm going to type that into the chat. I haven't seen the kit, oddly enough, on the Elenco website, but I do see it on Amazon, and I do see it, I think, at the bookstore sometime. So as part of the Make magazine, you can buy this thing with the book. And what's neat about it is it's pretty open. It's just a board, but it has a speaker. It is a working radio when you're completely done with it. It fits into a little desk stand. So if you're, you can put this thing on your desk and display it proud, but you build it in stages. And that's what's cool. It teaches you as you go along each stage of the build. So you're starting off building a very simple radio and then making it more and more complex as you go along. They also have other radio projects, including a very simple AM radio. I think it's based on like the MK484 AM radio chip. So that's also something simple to start with. There's a few on here that are relatively easy. And the thing is that you can start with a relatively simple kit like 4-stage QRP, the Murania medium wave radio that they sell. Even though it's not through hole, it's one of those Pittsburgh kits. It's a pretty simple build and you get a working radio when you're done with it. That's a cool place to start. And you can go on to things that have more components. The things that are key here, and I always point out a couple of really important things to remember when you're doing this. Check those resistors, double check everything that you're doing. And when you're doing things like toroids, always check for continuity. Toroids are probably the biggest pitfall in building these kits. And the two things that people mess up are not winding correctly and not correctly tinning or soldering the ends of the leads when you build a toroid. I don't know why a lot of these manuals or construction guides constantly tell you the same thing, which is you can burn the insulation off of the magnet wire with your soldering iron. Don't try it. You can try it, but don't make it your final answer. I've never really seen it work, and I think you need to have your soldering iron so hot to make it actually work. It's not really practical. I file mine. And if what I do is I wind a toroid, I test fit it through the board, and I take a little extra fine point Sharpie and I mark on the leads where they come through the board and on each side. And then I know, roughly where to clean the insulation off. I have a little tiny file I picked up at a hardware store here. I also have a little promotional emery board my wife got at work, and a little tiny vise, so I just set it all up and I just clean the leads. When you're done cleaning those leads off, test it with your meter for conductivity. That's how you know you got it. So, and then do it again when you get it on the board. Doesn't always work once you have it on the board because sometimes there's other components that might be creating a connection path, but in most cases, it'll give you a good answer.
Good tips, yeah.
The QCX Plus, which I touched on, is a lot of components and there's testing involved, but all the tests are built into the microprocessor. And there's toroids to wind, but it's an open kit. There's so much information available. If you mess up, Hans is great for support and his manuals are second to none. He has the best manuals. So I'd say build something simple and then try a QCX Plus. If you don't know CW, learn it. It's good incentive. I haven't finished learning CW yet, everybody. I'm going to broadcast that. And all of these things sitting around here that are CW only are great inspiration. I'll put it in front of my head here because the background keeps nixing it out. Great inspiration for finishing my education. I'm holding up a QCX Mini here. I built this. Yes, it works. We tested it out. And I have a couple more. One of them is going to get built for 60 meters, and another one is going to get the micro SDX conversion, which is a really neat project that converts this tiny little radio into a sideband rig. So,
thank you, thank you. Are there any other questions for Neil?
I have one.
Yes, Joe, go ahead.
Hi, Joe, N2QOJ in Arizona, former FairlawnARC local member many years ago through the 90s.
Welcome back. Yep, you bet.
Thank you for arranging this. And Neil, thank you very much. Since the newsletter in FairlawnARC came out, I was reading your background story and visited your website. I know I put together a lot of information for hams in my local community. So, and I know the kind of effort it takes to keep that and maintain it. So thank you very much, Neil, for putting something like this together. My question is, in your presentation, I only saw really one 2-meter receiver kit. Obviously, HF is the central focus here because of QRP, CW, and so forth. But sometime back, you may recall, 2-meter receiver kits were popular with Ramsey and others. And I believe Ramsey and both Ten-Tech had very nice 220 transceiver kit. The 10-Tech actually looked quite professional when it was completed. And I had a couple of friends who did those in Clifton, New Jersey. My question is, your thoughts, you're obviously an expert on kits here. Your thoughts on why we don't see, 2-meter, 220, 440 small transceiver kits?
I think it's the complexity. We might see some simple stuff again. I know Four-State has been toying around with the idea of putting out something like a 2-meter CW kit. Obviously, a much simpler build than the things you're talking about. The reason why I don't think we see any complex stuff anymore is because of the complexity of it. The cost at this point would be, I think, prohibitive. I don't think they could sell enough of them to make it worthwhile. When we're competing with transceivers, and I'm not talking about, the super cheap, Baofeng equivalent mobiles, but when you can buy a decent mobile transceiver for $200, dual band, monos for, $120, $150, I don't think they would be able to sell something like that for less than about $300. And it's just, I don't think that it's just not going to move enough. The receiver idea was, and Ramsey, we all mourn the loss of Ramsey. And Ten-Tech, which is still in business, but some of you may know the owner is a little weird. He shot himself in the foot on a public forum. When people were asking him when his stuff was coming back, he kind of blew a fuse and started basically yelling at everybody in the forum to stop asking him when his stuff was coming back. And wasn't very nice about it. Definitely a good way to get. I'd like to see something come back. I really would. And maybe someone will do it. But most of the current designers don't really dabble in VHF and UHF. It's a shame. But maybe we'll see something.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Okay, we've been talking about kits. Great presentation, Neil. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. We've been talking about kits briefly. Fred, W2AAB, mentioned the company, and we haven't spoken a lot about Heathkit. We know that a few years ago, it was mentioned that they were coming back. They did bring back a couple of kits. Actually, I did buy the clock, a little bit overpriced, but the novelty of getting something from the new generation of Heathkit. Do you know anything of what's going on with that company? If that's really going to happen, or if it's a dead DOA type thing?
Well, let's see. Do we see the Heathkit page? Did I share the right page?
Yep, that's the clock that I bought.
Yeah. So we were all very excited when Heathkit started teasing that they were coming back, and they made a big deal out of it. They were very secretive. They had this survey that they had a lot of people fill out, and then they were hinting that very, very few people and privileged people were testing their kits. And then when they finally hit and said, here's our kit, it was this. The Explorer Junior tuned RF AM radio receiver. This is the no solder version, but they had a solder version as well. $150 AM radio kit. Okay, it's Heathkit. And I have to tell you, from the people I've talked to, a couple of people who did invest in one of these, the solder version, you do get a real piece of machinery. It is nothing like any other kit you're going to buy. It is true to the original Heathkit quality, a ridiculously robust case. Everything is machined perfectly. The instructions are detailed. And you can even see, it's not a polyvaricon here. You're getting a real metal multi-gang capacitor here. It's a really good quality kit. Are there a lot of people out there looking to spend $150 on an AM radio kit? Probably not. It was kind of disappointing to see that this was really all they had come up with. The clock, once again, was an interesting idea to go back to something that they made years ago. This isn't too bad, considering what the most reliable clock sold for originally. If you do the math for inflation, that's probably fine. And it is a neat project. And this is the pipe antenna. It's an antenna for those of you living in restricted HOA type of areas. And basically it's designed just to look like plumbing. It's a dual band 2-meter 440 antenna that just looks like some pipes. It's a neat idea and probably not overpriced for what it is, but there's nothing else. And I had actually really kind of hoped that with some of the small designers that have come about, with even someone like Dave Benson selling off or giving away his designs from the old Small Wonder Labs, coming up with new designs, that they would have worked something out with somebody like Dave to market something like the Phaser digital radio kit, or reproductions of some of his old stuff, or work a deal with DZ kits to actually get their professional radio kit up and running. There's different companies out there, or make a kit version of a radio that's out there, something relatively simple. I think there's any number of directions they could have gone in, and I'm kind of disappointed that they haven't. But we're keeping an eye on Heathkit. They're still there. It's kind of like those of you who are probably surprised tonight to find out that Radio Shack was still in business. I'm going to give you another piece of information about Radio Shack. Not only are they still in business, the company that bought them recently seems hell-bent on getting back into the maker community. And if you go to their website, you will see a store finder link. There are still stores. They're franchises, little TV repair shops and hardware stores in small towns all around the country.
Honey, you should mention that we saw one in Lancaster, Pennsylvania yesterday. So.
Yep, they are offered the line, and one of the things that Radio Shack insists that they carry is the parts cabinet. So those of you that missed that, those drawers and drawers of parts, go to the website and look. I don't know about New Jersey. I know Central New York has a couple. I know Pennsylvania has more than that one. I've visited a couple, and the closest one to me here, I think, is in Connecticut. There's a chain of hobby stores in New England that took the line on as a chain. So hopefully we'll see more from them. I don't think they'll ever go back to full retail stores.
Thank you. Any other questions for Neil? We're getting close to time. Who wants the last word before I toss it to Nomar? I guess it's me. Okay. Thank you, Neil. Okay. On behalf of the club. So what a great presentation, and just a real fun night.